Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Luis Carlos Velez, RCN Radio, La FM, and our esteemed panel.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks to be here. We have a very, very difficult task at hand. We're 13 people over here, 13 or 11. We have to solve all the problems of Latin America, and we have to do it in 1 hour. So it's going to be pretty simple. So again, thank you. Thank you so much for having the time to dedicate it to this morning. This is going to be sort of a discussion, intimate discussion, the kind of discussions that you have in real life, in government, the kind of discussions that you have on TV, but without the cameras and you being the only audience present. So we're gonna try to do this as fast as we can and trying to answer the most important question at hand. And it's not necessarily the diagnosis. What we wanna find today, it's the how. How are we gonna do it? How are we gonna solve the problems? Because most of the times when we sit in this type of tables, we overdiagnose the problems. And as I said before about President Gustavo Petro in Colombia, he's 100% right on the diagnosis of the problem, 99% right on the diagnosis of the problem, but 100% wrong on the solutions of the problem. So what we're going to try to do here is to find solutions to the main problems of Latin America and how to work together. So I would like to start with the first question. It's, what do you think is the most important problem that we need to solve in Latin America? The most important problem that we need to solve in Latin America. We have one bullet and we need to use it right now. Dr. Almagro, I would like to start with you, please, sir.
Thank you very much. It depends on the taste of the consumer. We have different problems. We have problems for every kind of field that we work. We have social problems. We have political problems, economical problems. So you have to choose what is your main concern. For us, it could be how democracy works, because we feel that in this hemisphere, so far in this region, the better the democracy works, the better the level of development, the better the level of security, the better the level of access to rights and equality. So, and to make institutions stronger, democratic institutions that are able to fix the problems of the people, that are able to resolve the main problems of the social and economic agenda and the political agenda. And of course, considering that we talk about also social contracts, are those that they are breaking the social contracts and how the social contracts are broken in the region, mainly because of lack of justice, justice at every level of justice, from what the judiciary can do, but also what the structures, the social and economic structures of the region deliver to our table. And of course, the biggest second issue would be the problems of rule of law. So that you have different black and whites, and you have different zone of grays. So considering our 1 hour, I think is like the most compact I could do.
Absolutely. President Chinchilla, thank you very much. What do you think is the most important, the most pressing problem in Latin America right now?
I would say that right now, the most important problem is political, a political problem, because if you don't have the foundations, the institutions, the credibility, the trust in leadership, it is almost impossible to take legitimate decisions to resolve the rest of the problems we have. Because as I mentioned, Latin America will be the region with the less growth rates for the following years. So that means that we have too many things to do ahead. But if we do not have these conditions, it's almost impossible to move forward. And in that sense, just let me, for example, as part of this problem, political problems, we, for example, are suffering of polarization, social discontent, growing mistrust. Only 12% of Latin American citizens have trust in the majority of people. So with those conditions, it's almost impossible to feel that we are part of the same nation, of a same project, and to try to convene the different sectors to advance in the different decisions we need to take. So that is why I applauded you, because you are mentioning the social contract, the need to renew our social contract. And I think that probably this is now one of the major tasks that we need to face. How to do it? I can say something else later, because I understand we should try to say a few words in a few minutes. Thank you.
President Mahuad, many people say that democracy is failing right now, and this is what I'm hearing from the former speakers here. 59% of people in Latin America, according to Latino Barometro, do not believe in the political process, in democracy itself. And what we're seeing right now in countries like El Salvador, where we have an autocrat from the right, in countries like Venezuela, where we have an autocrat from the left, is telling us that people are right now trying to get results instead of the protection of democracy. Would you agree with something like that?
In my view, and according to already, yeah, okay. Abraham Lincoln defined democracy as the government of the people, for the people, and by the people. That means the origin must be elected from votes of the people. By the people, rule of law, as Luis already mentioned. And for the people, the results that everybody is expecting. For many years, I have the impression that we put too much attention to just the first one. If you have elections in a country, you have democracy. That's not true. Or if you are governing according to the law, you have democracy. You need to fulfill the third one. And the main problem for democracy, in my view, is that we have real difficulties to deliver to the people what they are expecting from us. And the main problem of our continent, I would say, narco-politics, is the intromission of narco and organized international crime into politics. You have governments that try to control that. Then you have governments that prefer to look on the other side, blind eye to the problem. Then you have some governments that are infiltrated to some extent, but then you have narco governments. So the narco traffickers become the government itself. And that's what we have to fight, because it is about values, et cetera, et cetera.
Felicia, I would like to continue with you. With the problem of Latin America, do you believe that people are right now fed up with democracy and are trying to get more response from other type of governments?
So, yes. And what I think is it's happening from civil society. As someone who also leads a civil society organization in Mexico, I think we've never seen a time when individuals could communicate and have the power of voice in a positive way, the way we're seeing now. We initially heard it, I think, from patients and the patient voice, and now we see it across civil society. The question, I think, is how to bring that together in a way that we realize that we can speak with one voice as opposed to one cause at a time.
Victor, I would like to hear from you. If this is what's going on at the government level, how does it feel at your level, at the real people level, different from what politicians are thinking and diagnosing about this matter?
The thing is that, following the previous answer, is that when you are doing the delivery, the citizens are not feeling that they are receiving that they are expecting. And one thing that is happening is that social network that I think that is important to mention is the expectation that have at this moment the population is not related with the reality that could be delivered. And sometimes at this moment the misinformation, polarization, and manipulation is being part of the game. And that is something that democracy, that was the thing is that it's not enough to have election. It's enough if we have the possibility to have the real delivery for the population. And the thing is that the expectation at this moment are higher than the thing that can the government deliver.
Andres, can you throw one fix for democracy, like real fast, something that comes up in your mind? Like, this is the problem that we have in terms of democracy, in the failure of delivery. What do we need to do?
Easy, no?
That's what journalists normally do.
I think democracy is not representing the people, and that is the issue. I mean, what people want is jobs. What people want are opportunities. What people want are opportunities to have additional leisure in their lives. And we are not fulfilling the amount of jobs, the amount of opportunities, and the amount of leisure time so we can really enjoy life. And we are seeing the rest of the world doing it. Mm-hmm. So people in LATAM is not expecting anymore. They want it right now, as Victor was saying. Just to give you a couple of numbers, and I stop. Over the past 25 years, global productivity per country has grown at six times. Mm-hmm. In the rest of the world. In LATAM, 0. That means that we used to say it's going to take a decade or 2 decades to close the gap.
Right.
Then a century. Now we can say never. Never. If we don't close that difference, never are going to see LATAM develop. And we have to change that. We have to create the conditions for people to invest in LATAM. We need to invest $1 trillion additional US dollars per year in LATAM, every year, for the next 25 years to create the jobs that we need to create. So you can contribute with taxes to really do the reforms that everybody wants to do on the social sector. So it's about the money, stupid, as everybody says.
Federico, you want to jump in?
Actually, for me, like the main problem right now, at least in Mexico, is security, but it's like a cause. It's like a response for a deep and root cause that it's, for me, two ways of vision, that it's the distribution of wealth and the creation of wealth. In America, we have these two visions, and for me, Latin American leaderships from business, political, social sectors have to focus more on create the wealth, not to distribute the wealth, because with that, all the problems came.
Alejandra?
I think building on what everybody said, I would say the biggest problem is poverty and social indicators that we have right now. We're not even close to meeting the SDG goals, but the climate ones are kind of getting met. The social ones are totally flat. Between 2000 and 2013, as a region, we went from 50% poverty to 30%, 2013. And right now, we're at 29, 30% again. I mean, the last decade, we've done nothing. And I think that gets reflected in unsatisfaction, no job creation, productivity. So I think it's about the money, but it's about how do we focus properly the money to get impact into what we do, from private, multilateral developments, and the public sector.
I would like to open it for everybody and whoever wants to answer this one. It's apparently the main issue here is trust in the system. We haven't been able to deliver. People are getting advantage out of this, and solutions are not easy. How do we build the trust? Who wants to tackle this one? Fabrizio.
Yeah, I can go. I'd actually like to frame it a little different. I think the world has problems to which our region can be the solution. We are there's food insecurity in the world. We are the largest net exporter of agri-foods. For the energy transition, there's no energy transition without Latin America. 2/3 of the world's lithium are in the Northern Triangle, Bolivia, Chile, and Argentina. Talk about biodiversity and climate change. We have 32% of the world's water reserves, 23% of the world's forest. So without our region, there is no solution to global problems. Undoubtedly, Andres, you're right, productivity and growth and human capital. I tend to be a little bit more optimistic. Intel is producing chips in Costa Rica, a 1.3 billion investment. Mr. Musk with Tesla announced a 5 billion investment in Mexico. Volkswagen is producing electronic vehicles in my country, in Uruguay, and the list goes on. So there is a productivity gap, a dearth, a challenge, but we have the comparative advantages to benefit from the world's problems.
Miguel, do you want to jump in?
Yes. No, for me, institutions are very important. I think institutions are a reflection of what people has happened in the last several years, in the sense that people doesn't feel to be included. There is no growth, so they don't have jobs. So it's a very simple equation. I think for getting capital into this region, the same way that Asia got the capital, we need to have planning, long-term planning, and building some of these issues that have been mentioned here: energy transition, biodiversity, agriculture, whatever. Countries must get together. Some countries are very small; they cannot compete, so they need to get together with others and get this planning, and then do that with the private capital, and the private capital will come. Institutions, I think, with that, you create an institution framework to have the private capital coming based on competitive advantages that the region have, and then that will create jobs.
Margaret, do you want to close in on this one?
We've been talking, I agree with what the colleagues have been saying, and collaboration between the government, civil society, and private sector are needed to address, I think, not only the democratic backsliding, lack of rights, but also the need for the economic growth. And I think that, we're trying in USA to ramp up our engagement with the private sector as crucial partners in all of the different areas. Because it's important to have the private sector engaged on said planning to help to identify some of the priorities, some of the comparative advantages, and influence also the government to be able to take the kind of decisions that are needed for achieving the growth to deliver on the promises to the people.
And this is a great bridge for something that many of you have proposed in different outlets, and it's what do we do in order not to depend specifically from larger countries in Latin America, not depending from the United States, nor China, nor different type of investments? Do we need to start working more collaboratively together within the region? What we need to do, Felicia?
So I wanted to bridge the two questions, Luis Carlos, and this is where we're at the University of Miami. We have never seen a crisis in higher education like we've seen in the last few months and this year. And building trust is hugely important among our students, but it's teaching how to build trust. So if we can figure out, and something we're trying to do here, how to help our students to learn to talk to each other about issues where they can be tremendously at odds, that's where I think that in this incoming group that's going to come into our labor markets, fill the private sector and the public sector and otherwise, we're going to be able to foster feelings of trust, but also the capacity to be able to generate it.
Mm-hmm. Somebody else?
Well, I think that,
President.
excuse me. I think that part of the problem is that some of the responses that we are trying to provide to this crisis of expectations, this distrust among ourselves, but also the growing gap between the citizens and the institutions. I think that the responses many countries are trying to give to these governance and democratic problems, instead of resolving the problems, are aggravating them. Because it is not true vertical, authoritarian kind of leadership that we are going to resolve. these problems of distrust. And instead, I think that we should try, and there are not many countries trying to do it, we should try rather to, for example, what Felicia was saying, how to provide even more voice, how to stimulate individual and social agency, how to reform the public institutions so they can open the space for citizens during the whole policy-making decision process. So that is going to be the only way to rebuild trust among the different sectors and those who are governing now. And again, I think that poverty, competitiveness, everything now is urgent. But if we do not have the kind of leadership that we need, it's going to be very difficult to move forward.
Right, Andres.
I joke around saying that the last time that we worked out a plan together was La Gran Colombia. And ever since 1830, when Bolivar died, we've been just trying to destroy La Gran Colombia, not to create La Gran Colombia. And it's kind of sad. I mean, it's like thinking that by having different type of caudillos around the region, we're going to be able to find a way. And I don't believe that going from one corner to the other, we're going to be able to do it. We have to do it together. Nobody's going to do it for us. I mean, it's not the States, it's not China. It has to be ourselves. And I mean, if you believe that you cannot work with the private sector, well, guess what? 85% of the total investment in Latin America have come historically from the private sector. Try to get to 100 million jobs, additional jobs, and $1 billion additional investment per year without the private sector. If you believe that is the left or is the right, you're absolutely wrong. The extremists never get into the consensus that you need to create a social contract. You need to have people to work together a social contract, otherwise there's no contract.
Right.
So it's about a vision.
And how, again, the big question here is how we do it. What do we need to do in order to convince the private sector to still believe in our countries, even though there's a lot of countries right now that have autocratic governments, and we don't have, as citizens of those countries, the possibility of fight those governments if they want to take things out of us? How do we convince the private sector in order to still believe in our countries? What do we do?
No, the private sector, I think, is convinced about Latin America. The only issue is that they have too many risks around that. The volatility of investing in Latin America is high. So the key question is how we reduce volatility. Clearly, institutions is one side of the equation. It's very, very important. And I'm talking about regulatory environment, I'm talking about tax long term, but there are some sectors in the region, I think some had been mentioned before, that are quite good. Many countries believe that mining is important for them, right? If we want, Latin America has a very important role in contributing to the energy transition, climate change. From where? From the mining sector, for example, okay? So miners are investing. Why? Because countries have preserved, in general, the large mining countries have preserved their mining rules in the long run. We need to find on all the other sectors that happen, and if that happens, then I think investment will come. Then there are two other risks that we can talk later. One is foreign exchange risk, that I have ideas of how we can solve that problem. That is important, And the other one is that, yes, some of the investors are requesting higher rate of return for the investments in Latin America vis-a-vis Asia, for example, at the moment. Well, we need to find some sort, with the DFIs, some sort of a scheme to reduce that risk premium. And I think there are ways to do that, like, for example, first loss, okay? First loss schemes. So I think we need to start working together at the DFI level, government level, just to put in place some of these things that will go a long way to really bring capital to the countries.
Dr. Almagro, what we've been seeing here and in this type of debates is that there is a lot of deception, primarily from the young people. Young communities are saying, hey, this is the first time that I'm not going to be able to buy a house. This is the first time that I'm not going to be able to make as much money as my parents. This is the first time that I'm not going to be able to educate my kids as I was educated. I was told that if I went to school, didn't do drugs, didn't do crime, behave, I was going to have a good life as my parents did. But this is going to be a generation that is not going to be able to do it. How do we convince people that this is the system that is going to provide them all that? What do you think?
I think this is not a type of debate, my dear friend. I think we are talking like the nephews of Donald Duck, like we are complementing each other, like Hewitt, Dewey, and Louis. We are talking like that, and I think everything, all the pieces, they go together practically. They are not pieces that go out of context in this. Maybe the only thing that I would beg to disagree was about the right or wrong that you said at the beginning, because I'm not so sure about right or wrong. I think that the efficiency of governance and the project of a governance, I think we are facing some other problems in the democracy, and it's the lack of institutions, or that some extreme cases like Haiti or Venezuela, but we are also facing some cases of weak institutions that we saw during the pandemic. We are facing cases of institutions that they don't provide enough on real time, because the timing of the 21st century is different than the timing of the 20th century. We have to adjust that. But I think more or less all what we said is related to the same patterns, the same problems. We have, I think, 200 decades in Latin America of 200 years of lost decades, and that I think is what shows our level of development today, and the level of the social problems that we face and the injustices that we face. These social problems have been there for centuries. Some of them, I always put the example of Uruguay because I know it a little bit better, maybe because it's the most equal country in the region, but still we are facing the same problems that in 1815, Artigas, when he did his reform of the land, he said, okay, the most privileged and would be those that they need more, the most vulnerable, and they were widowers with children and Afro-descendant population and indigenous people. And 200 years later, we have the same structure of poverty, the same structure of poverty. Single mothers with children. We have the Afro-descendant population that is 8% of the population and 40% of poverty, and indigenous people were exterminated after our independence, so they regrettably they don't count anymore. So that polarization is just a manifestation in our skin, our epidermis of the real social problems that we are not facing, and we have had them in front of our nose for the past 200 years, and we have not been able to fix them. Mm-hmm. And those we have fixed something, still we owe much more than we have fixed. So I think that is, and of course, yeah, we have a potential. We always have a potential. We have always had a potential. My dear friend Fabrizio, I think I don't disagree with you. It goes perfectly into the thing, but that we should be taken into consideration for the solution of the global problems is one thing. And another thing is to fix the problems of Latin America. That is another thing. That is maybe the gap. We have provided for the solutions of the global problems for, I don't know, for 200 years. But still, we have our own problems the same. So that is our main challenge. And we have not been able to defeat poverty and justice. I think justice is the root of the poverty that we fix. And the results are not there, but they have not been there for quite a while. Yeah, we need to integrate. We don't talk about integration anymore, and that is something that sort of bothers me. But we need a different level of development. That's what is requested in order to bring investment. Because if not, we'll not be able to bring the proper investments that we need if we don't do something for ourselves and we fix the problems that have been in front of our nose for 200 years.
Thank you. I have observed that we are focusing this Concordia meeting in the relation between public and private sector. So I would like to continue with that introduction. And let's think about music. If somebody is interested in music, I can imagine two extremes. One is the classic music, based on the structure of the piece and the role of the conductor. Classic music, everything is predetermined. Everything needs to be exactly planned. And the other extreme is, let's say, jazz music, where you improvise almost everything. And you have every kind of mix in between both. Let's say that classic music is an economy centrally planned, and jazz is where you trust a lot in markets. And my position, my personal perspective, is that you need both hands, the invisible hands of the markets, the typical liberal idea, plus the visible hand of the government to control the excess of the markets. You cannot just leave the markets to work at their will, because we know all the problems that produces. So we need to first decide what is the genre of music we want to play. Let's say liberal democracies. In liberal democracies, we can have many different scores of music. Let's say we prefer democracy and the rule of law. And then, what is the role of the conductor? We call it the government, to keep things on track. And basically, what do we need to protect? I think we need to protect globalization now, and how important is geopolitics for that. We need to see the maps to understand the resources, etc. As Daniel said, we need to protect democracy against organized crime. We need to protect science and technology against itself or themselves, because they have the seed of destruction if we do not plan that correctly. We need to protect the environment. We need to protect human rights, and that includes poverty, inclusion, equality, etc. So in these very short moments we have here, I think that's part of the environment where we will be focused, and we have many tactics and plans to develop, but we should start with the strategy of the how, thinking what is our main goal and objective.
I would like to mention, because we really don't have a lot of time, that it is important to think in what we'll do in terms of how we can solve the problems. And I think that it's important to think about in the new industry, how we can incorporate Latin America and the Caribbean in things related with artificial intelligence, cloud computing, quantum computing, everything, because at the end we need to train the people, we need to develop the skills, we need to close the gap. This morning I was discussing with Andres that Europe and US are investing around 600 billions in tech per year, but the rest of the world are investing around 200 billions. That is that per person, the Europe and US are investing $250, and Latin American is just like a $10, $12. That is the gap is increasing. That the only way is that we have the possibility to invest and to prepare that countries to be part of the new economy, to be part of the digital economy, and to be part of the new industry. Because at the end, that is things related with competitive and the possibility to reduce the gap.
Following on that line, it takes two to tango, salsa, merengue, and to grow. We need public and private. You cannot ignore the public sector provides. The public sector provides public goods, infrastructure, human capital, training, institutions. It sets the level playing field. But the employer, the innovators, those are the entrepreneurs. That's the private sector. And that adequate balance and combination has been hard to reach in our region. That's why it's important to promote dialogues of this kind with public and private. At the IDB, we, much in partnership with the OAS, we lead the Americas Business Dialogue, 450 multinational corporations of the hemisphere, which get together before the summits of the Americas Next year, the CEO summit we will do once again will be in the Dominican Republic. President Chinchilla, we had you, and I remember very vividly in Cartagena. And public and private, the CEOs and the heads of state working on regulatory frameworks for artificial intelligence, because the market always goes faster than the governments. For the governments to really grasp the intricacies of regulating artificial intelligence, much challenging. Without dialogue, there's no growth or development.
Yeah, no, just to add that, go back to this planning idea, that is very important, but not only the planning idea that, getting together and discussing between the public and private sector, public policies. The key issue is to keep those policies in the long run. Because if you have volatility on those, is what, you increase the risk premium of your business. And people say, look, I'm not going there because, I think it was mentioned before that contracts, long-term contracts, you want to invest in infrastructure, you want to invest in anything that will take 10 years, 8 years, 15 years. People need to know that any government that will come from the sites that were mentioned before, extremes or not extremes, will keep those contracts in place. Otherwise, the capital will not come.
Every time I come to a place like this, I ask myself why I come. For the past, 20 years, probably many of us have been coming to Concordia or the United Nations or the Inter-American Development Bank Assembly. And I ask myself, what is motivating me to come back again and again and again? Because I agree, for many years we have been looking for an answer. And I don't think I'm coming for an answer anymore. I'm coming with the expectation, with the hope of finding a movement, of finding the leaders, helping the leaders, becoming a leader, whatever it is. So we can start moving along and understanding that it's us together. It's not somebody from Mars that is going to come to solve it. It's us. So at a certain moment, we have to start just defining not what to do, but acting together and structuring and getting the resources to the organizations that have to be recreated or creating the new ones and move along. And I'm absolutely sure that in 50 years, we will completely change the region if we move along.
On Andres's more positive note, I think that, and combining to what has been said before, I think it's a very interesting moment. We have a lot of opportunities, as Fabrizio was saying, in terms of critical minerals. We have 50% of the world's ecosystems, agro-industrial productions, but we don't want to be another lost opportunity moment in the region, which is what always happens. And on the other hand, coming to Andres's point, I think all of us here are the ones who can actually have the power to be able to do that, because we have to do it together, but we have to complement each other. So for example, we can't just think on money that is going to be invested in the projects. It really has to be about how many people are we really helping with these projects? What is the impact of the public sector and private sector things that we do? If we don't think in terms of how much does the average income rise in the area where we're doing that project, instead of just kilometers or instead of just the education, is that really going to impact the average PISA score of the students who are there, which needs teachers, needs roads to get to school, etc.? It's not going to work. So I think that's something that's the issue. It's focusing on impact, and that's where development banks have a very big role to play. And the other thing is thinking in terms of regional projects that are important. So we only have 15% of the intra-regional commerce in Latin America is intra-regional, as compared to 25 to 50% in other regions. Why is that? Why do we not help each other, as you were saying before, Luis Carlos? And to think of like large projects, El Corredor Interoceánico in the south. What are we going to do with the north-south commerce problems? But that we have the solutions and we can work together in terms of de-risking, in terms of thinking long-term, in terms of bringing in the different actors, I think are the way where we have the solutions and we have the problems. But we have to be optimistic of us as a region.
Where do you think are the most important opportunities in Latin America right now?
I was going to answer something else, but I'll pivot right to that.
You can come back to that.
No, sorry, it's all good. So I love the idea of a movement and looking for a movement, which is what we see in our students when they're doing what they need to do and talk to each other and discuss those key problems in our societies. And I also agree that the inequity and the poverty has been structural and has not moved. But you had said at one point, Luis Carlos, that this generation, it's never going to do as well as the last generation. That's not true on a number of issues. And I think we have to stop giving only the negative message, or we'll never get that movement. So in health, and even controlling for the pandemic, we have seen huge changes. It's a better situation than any of our parents or grandparents could ever have imagined. In life expectancy, in child mortality, and maternal mortality, and I'm not putting aside those structural problems and what we need to do in inequities, but our kids and the generation who are at university today, they're going to live their health problems, not die from their health problems. And that's a whole different view. The other is that the way that we can communicate, that they can communicate, that was never possible when I was living and trying to get things going in Colombia years ago. We couldn't communicate that easily. We had to go and walk onto the street to talk to street children. Now, we talk to each other, they talk to each other. And that has got to be something that can be harnessed for good.
Well, actually, we're an example of a transformative alliance. We started 3 years ago. We're a business initiative named El Gran Bajío. Bajío is a region in Mexico, in the center of Mexico, focused on aerospace, automotive, pharma, and biotechnology industries. So what we do, it's in 2020 we had COVID, and also in Mexico they take out ProMexico. I don't know if you remember ProMexico. From one day to another, they closed around 50 offices of business promotion of Mexico. So in the region, the business people were like, I don't know how to say in English, but like chickens without head, no? Running what we are going to do. So what we do is to get together. And in these 3 years, right now we have a network of 7,000 business in the region, sponsored by big global companies like HSBC, KPMG, PPG, Korn Ferry. And what we do is to promote Mexican companies to take advantage of all the opportunities of nearshoring that is right now, in the North America. So we have two ways to do the things, to do the same or to do the other. Mm-hmm. And we decide to do the other. The same will be to create a chamber of commerce, no? We decide to do the other, and sometimes the other is more difficult and is scary. Jean-Paul Sartre said that the other, it's the hell. So how you build trust with time, right, and results.
Opportunities. Who wants to highlight on the opportunities?
Well, we mentioned some before. We live in a post-globalization world, undoubtedly. In the COVID era, it came very much to the attention that we depended on certain regions for specific, very important inputs. And as you know, the executive order of the White House put certain sectors, like the ones we mentioned, at the forefront of the priorities. And as we said, the region has a comparative advantage in those. We're doing a study on the APEP countries, on the 10 APEP countries, which is the Economic Prosperity, Initiative for Economic Prosperity, on critical minerals, semiconductors, which are key and permeate every sector, and of course the pharma and medical devices. So those are some sectors, but agribusiness, for example, we coexist with the largest levels of food insecurity, and at the same time we are the largest exporters of food. So back to the question of economic integration, the problem is logistics costs and transportation costs are extremely high. Those are the inhibitors of trade in the region. If we don't reduce our transportation and logistics costs, and that's an opportunity for investment for the private sector in infrastructure as well.
I'm going to be politically incorrect on that, but maybe. I think the nearshoring opportunity is the most important opportunity we have, and we're going to miss it if we don't change. But it's not only us, it's the US as well. And let me tell you why I believe that. I mean, for the past 4,000 years, if you just take the 300 years that just happened, the center of the world was the Mesopotamia. And 51% of the total GDP of the world was first India with 31%, and then China with 20%. And Asia was 65% of the total economy and the total everything in the world. And then suddenly the Industrial Revolution came and changed everything. And then just close your eyes and think what is going to happen at the end of this century. In 25 years, you're going to have Chinese developed, Indians developed, Indonesians in the margin. And Asia is going to become the power again. We're going to have the North American continent, very strong, the most important in terms of innovation. But we are the Americas, and the only way that we're going to have a billion people with Western culture defending the values that we want, the democracy that we want, the life that we have had, is that we work together. So a Marshall Plan, a whatever strategy you want to call it, has to be built together with the US. And then we will have another 1,000 years of good history.
And how do we convince them?
Working together. I mean, having this discussion here, going from here to Washington, going from here to Bogota, going from here to Mexico, going to the OEA, and starting a conversation and a dialogue and a movement in which we have to find a common purpose as a region.
Doctor Almagro, ¿quiere decir algo?
I want to say too many things, but maybe considering the time now. Yes, we have a problem that is we are doing something wrong, and that is mainly our lack of capacities when we need to produce something that the world doesn't have, or we need to create something that the world doesn't know so far. We don't have that. The brands, the patents are practically everywhere except in the region, except in Latin America. That is the biggest challenge that we have ahead. And of course, opportunities will come with that. Will come with knowledge. Will come with if we can make a jump that we are short. Jump to development. We are sometimes in the border. No, we are close, but when the moment to do it, we fail somehow. And I know. Thank you. And I know it's a way of celebrating, I guess. The thing is that democracy is suffering a lot. During the pandemic, of course, we may be better than before the pandemic in many ways, but it's true that during the pandemic we died more than any other region in the world. Most of us died more than any other region, and we were one of the few regions that was not able to produce vaccines. I think with Antarctica. So those are problems that we are facing, and of course, we would like to look at the positive, and I think it's fine if for some people it will be great if we just focus on the positive, and that's great too, and that complement. But there are people that need desperately that we focus on the problems we have, because they need desperately these problems to be resolved and to be fixed one for all. And we have a problem too with democracy in a way that I think in this region at least, we used to come from, okay, somebody from the right would create business opportunity and would trigger some production and some growth, and then would come somebody from the left. Democracy would readapt and readjust, because somebody of the left would reassign resources a little bit more efficient maybe. And so, but then we stopped producing ideology in this region, and we go in the right, since the 90s, since the Berlin Wall fall, we stopped producing ideology, and we on the left, We stopped at 2 and we went back to the 60 sometimes to say something that may seem smart. So that proper readjustment that more or less everybody has, we don't have it, and we need it. And that's why these days we have less common ground between the right and the left than ever before. And that is, for me, my biggest concern, because it means that you cannot have projects in the long term, because, of course, there will be a contraction and then a destruction, and then, again, the other way. And we are trapped into that. And of course, it's we have to respect the rules of economy, but we have to respect the rules of law and the rules of the judiciary. And I think that it will help a lot to attract investment, but a lot depends on us. If we are not able to create, if we are not able to be smart enough to be at the top level of creation in the world, we are in trouble. We will be permanently in trouble. We will not fix anything in that way.
Yeah, I know we don't have much time, but I think the key issue that I really wanted also to mention here is that we have an opportunity as well with our young people in the region. And there are many guys that can do it, could be entrepreneurs. So maybe for politicians these days, it's easy to not put rules on them and give all the facilities for them to really be able to do that in their countries and not leave to the US or other places to do that. So I think there's a huge opportunity, and I think we can do it. It's very cheap to do it.
Do you want to wrap up with something?
Yes, so just thinking about some of the things that have been commented here, on the international cooperation and financial institutions, it works best when we're following the lead of the countries that we are working with. So, as we're talking about the broad alliances in country with civil society, governments, private sector, et cetera, having that clear vision makes it easier for others outside to support that vision, boost that vision, and invest more.
Thank you so much. I want to read some of the final outputs of the questionnaire that we have today. First question is, based on this discussion, what do you believe is the greatest challenge facing cross-sectoral collaboration in the Latin American and Caribbean region? It wins with 33%. Actually, it's a tie between value and cultural differences. The second option that we have is a lack of trust, particularly between governmental and non-governmental actors. And then there's a tie also between power imbalances between partner organizations and continuity and sustainability of partnerships during political transitions. That's the number one. Oh, and actually kind of moved right now. It's moving again. Oh, you guys are able to see it? Okay. So let's go to the second one, second question. It says, how do we ensure that cross-collaborative partnerships are mutually beneficial, specifically between large-scale and medium-scale organizations and smaller organizations? 50% responded align, it's moving, align missions and objectives to ensure synergy and common goals. That's 66%. And the second answer, it's regular monitoring and evaluation. And the last question, there's a tie between networking, building rapport, and maintaining existing partnerships, and accountability and transparency mechanisms. That gets 45%, and evidently it's the most voted option here right now. So with that, I want to thank everybody in our panel, and I want to thank you for the time for being here. Thank you so much.